The anniversary celebration was in full swing when my grandson tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "Look under the table." I smiled, thinking it was a child's game. "What is it, sweetheart?" His small face turned serious, almost frightened. "Just look. Please." The music and laughter swirled around us as I slowly bent down. My breath caught in my throat. Taped beneath the mahogany table was a manila envelope bearing my name in Robert's familiar handwriting, my dead husband's handwriting. I straightened up, my hands trembling, and met my grandson's worried eyes. Without a word, I took his hand and we quietly slipped away from the celebration. The coat room was dimly lit, filled with the rustle of expensive fabrics and distant champagne toasts. Tommy positioned himself by the door like a tiny sentinel while I opened the envelope with shaking fingers. Inside, a USB drive, photographs, and a note that chilled my soul. "Margaret, if you're reading this, it means Michael has gone through with his plan. This anniversary is a lie. Everything is a lie. Trust Anderson. Trust no one else. Find the truth before it's too late. Your loving husband, Robert." The photographs scattered across my lap like accusations. Michael entering a pharmacy with forged prescriptions. Michael meeting with Dr. Martinez in what looked like a heated argument about medical protocols. Michael's signature on insurance papers dated suspiciously close to David's death. And one photo that made my blood freeze, Michael leaving Tommy's father's apartment building at 2 a.m, the night David died in that accidental fall. "How long have you known about this?" I whispered. "Since Grandpa got really sick last month," Tommy said, his 8-year-old eyes carrying secrets too heavy for his shoulders. "He told me Daddy Michael was making him sicker, not better. He made me promise to show you at the anniversary party if something happened to him." The weight of revelation crashed over me. Robert hadn't been losing his mind in those final weeks. He'd been fighting for his life while documenting his own murder. "Tommy, sweetheart, how many times did Grandpa ask you to hide things from Daddy Michael?" "Lots." He said Daddy Michael was pretending to help, but really making him confused on purpose. Grandpa taught me how to use his secret phone to record things when Daddy Michael came to visit. Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. Daddy Michael would get really mad when he couldn't find it. "What kind of things did you record?" Daddy Michael talking on the phone about money and medicine and how Grandpa was taking too long to go to heaven, and about my real daddy too. Tears welled up in Tommy's eyes. Grandpa said my real daddy didn't fall down the stairs by accident. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. David's sudden death 3 years ago, Sarah's rapid remarriage to the charming man who had comforted her through her grief, Robert's strange behavior in his final weeks, trying to tell me something I'd been too grief-stricken to understand. Through the coat room window, I could see the anniversary celebration continuing. Michael stood beside Sarah at the head table, his arm possessively around my daughter's waist, accepting congratulations on their second wedding anniversary. The fairy lights cast dancing shadows across his face, and for a moment he looked like the caring son-in-law I had welcomed into our family. But that man had never existed. "We need to go back," I said, straightening my dress and checking my reflection in the small mirror. The woman staring back looked the same, but everything had changed. "We'll smile and celebrate, and we won't let anyone know what we've found." "Can you be brave for Grandma?" Tommy nodded solemnly. "Grandpa taught me how. He said sometimes being brave means pretending everything's okay when it's really not." A few weeks, the final month of Robert's illness. The timeline when he must have realized Michael was actively poisoning him and began his desperate race against time to leave us evidence. We returned hand in hand, my purse heavy with the truth. The ballroom sparkled with crystal and lies. When Michael's eyes met mine across the crowded room, he raised his champagne flute with that brilliant smile that had charmed my daughter into marriage. I raised mine in return, my face a mask of maternal pride, while inside I calculated how many days I had left to live. The toast echoed across the ballroom. To family. And I realized my son-in-law was already planning my funeral. But Robert had left me more than evidence. He had left me a roadmap to survival if I was brave enough to follow it. The recording device hidden in the Christmas ornament. The lawyer who was really an ally. The network of people who had been watching and waiting. The music swelled, couples danced, and somewhere in that sea of celebration, a mother began the most dangerous game of her life, protecting her daughter and grandson from the monster who had married into our family. The war had begun, but this time, I wasn't defenseless. At midnight, the USB drive revealed horrors that made my hands shake so violently I nearly knocked over my tea. The first file showed Robert in his hospital bed just 2 weeks before his death, his hands trembling, but his voice steady and determined. Margaret, if you're watching this, then I'm gone, and Michael has made his move. What I'm about to show you will be hard to accept, but you must believe me. Our son-in-law is a calculating killer. He held up a document with Michael's signature. Look at this date, 3 days before my diagnosis was even confirmed. He forged power of attorney documents while I was still healthy. This wasn't opportunistic. This was a premeditated murder, planned months in advance. Behind Robert's voice, another recording began playing. Michael's voice, cold as winter steel. David's insurance policy goes to Sarah, but I'll manage it as her husband. The old man, Morrison, is next on the list. These things have to look natural, like a progression of his illness. My teacup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. David, Sarah's first husband, Tommy's biological father, the accidental fall that had made Sarah a widow at 28 and opened the door for Michael to swoop in as her savior. Robert's video continued, I've been documenting everything for 6 weeks now, ever since I realized the medications were making me worse instead of better. Every forged signature, every illegal transaction, every conversation Michael thought was private. But more importantly, I've built you a network of allies who can help you fight back when the time comes. The sound of car doors slamming outside made me freeze. Through my kitchen window, I saw Michael's BMW pulling into my driveway. At 12:47 in the morning, he was checking on me, making sure his elderly victim was behaving as expected. I closed the laptop and slipped the USB into my jewelry box just as the front door opened. I had given him a key months ago, trusting him as family. Now that trust felt like a weapon pointed at my heart. Margaret? My son-in-law's voice called softly through the darkness. I saw your lights on. Just checking to make sure you're all right. I'm fine, sweetheart, I called back, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Just couldn't sleep. You know how it is. Michael appeared in my kitchen doorway, still wearing his anniversary tuxedo, but something had changed in his demeanor. The celebratory glow was gone, replaced by a predator's focused attention. His eyes swept the room methodically, cataloging every detail. Big day today. Lots of emotions. He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of champagne mixed with something else. The acrid smell of perspiration that comes with stress. What are you doing up so late? Making tea. Would you like some? No, thank you. He moved closer, and I caught something dangerous flickering behind his concerned expression. Margaret, I need to ask you something directly. Did you take anything from the party tonight? Maybe something you found somewhere you shouldn't have been looking. My blood turned to ice. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. I don't know what you mean, sweetheart. Tommy said you two went somewhere together during dinner. He was vague about where. Michael's smile never wavered, but his eyes went Arctic cold. You know how children that age can be. They sometimes hide things they shouldn't, or find things that don't belong to them. We went to get a tissue from the coat room. My allergies, you know. Of course. He moved even closer, close enough that I could see the calculation behind his eyes. Margaret, I hope you understand that I only want what's best for this family, for Sarah and Tommy, for you. His hand reached out and smoothed my hair in a gesture that might have looked affectionate to an observer, but felt like a threat assessment. Sometimes people stumble across information that's complicated. Information that might seem alarming, but is actually part of a larger plan to protect everyone involved. Michael, you're scaring me. Am I? His voice carried genuine curiosity, as if my fear were an interesting psychological data point. That's not my intention at all. I'm just concerned that you might have gotten the wrong impression about something, made assumptions that could be dangerous for everyone. He leaned down and kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt like a death sentence being passed with familial affection. Sleep well, Margaret. Sweet dreams. Sweet. And remember, family always comes first. Sometimes that means keeping certain discoveries within the family. After he left, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, listening to the familiar sounds of my house settling around me. The refrigerator hummed its mechanical lullaby. The grandfather clock in the hallway marked the passing seconds with relentless precision. And somewhere in the darkness, my son-in-law was planning my death with the same methodical attention to detail he had used to murder David and Robert. But Robert had left me weapons I was only beginning to understand. I retrieved the laptop and found the emergency contact information he had hidden in a coded folder. Anderson Law Offices, after-hours emergency line. This is Margaret Morrison. I believe you've been expecting my call. A pause. Then, Mrs. Morrison. Robert told me this day would come. I've been waiting by the phone for weeks. Are you somewhere safe? For now, but not for long. Listen carefully. Tomorrow, Michael will escalate his timeline. Robert's investigation uncovered a pattern. Michael doesn't just kill for money. He enjoys the psychological control, the slow destruction of his victims' credibility before he eliminates them. You have maybe 48 hours before he makes his final move. What do I do? First, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Michael Stevens isn't just a murderer. He's a serial killer who targets vulnerable families. David wasn't his first victim. Robert wasn't his second. We've identified at least 3 other suspicious deaths connected to him over the past decade, all elderly or recently widowed people who trusted him with their finances. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. How many people has he killed? We think at least 6, possibly more. He's very good at it. Patient, methodical, always with perfect alibis and grieving relatives who can testify to his devotion. Anderson's voice carried grim determination. But Robert found his weakness. Michael's arrogance. He can't resist explaining his superiority to his victims before he kills them, and that's going to be his downfall. The Christmas ornament that Robert mentioned contains more than evidence. It contains a complete surveillance system that's been recording every conversation in your house for the past month, every threat, every admission, every moment Michael thought he was safe from observation. I thought of all the times Michael had visited, all the private conversations about Robert's decline, all the moments when his mask had slipped just slightly. How much does it have? Everything. But Margaret, you need to be very careful. If Michael suspects what you know, he'll accelerate his timeline. Can you act normal around him for one more day? I've been acting normal around him for 2 years, without knowing he was a killer. I think I can manage one more day. Good. Tomorrow evening, when he comes to check on you, you're going to do something that will seem very dangerous, but is actually our best chance to catch him. You're going to confront him with what you know, and you're going to record every word he says. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. But as I hung up the phone and prepared for what might be my last night alive, I thought of David falling down those stairs, of Robert struggling to speak through medication-induced confusion, of Tommy's frightened eyes as he handed me that envelope. The monster in my family had gotten away with murder for too long. Tomorrow, that was going to end. Tuesday morning brought Michael with coffee, croissants, and an intensity I had never seen before. He stood on my doorstep at precisely 8 o'clock, his smile bright, but his body language screaming barely controlled tension. "You look wonderful, Margaret," he said, stepping into my house without invitation. "I hope you slept better than I did." "Did you have trouble sleeping?" "Just thinking about family, about the future." He settled into Robert's favorite chair with territorial confidence, but I noticed the way his fingers drummed against the armrest, a nervous habit I'd never observed before. "I've been considering some changes that need to be made." As he arranged the pastries with unnecessary precision, I caught sight of his lower back when he winced slightly. The old football injury that Anderson had mentioned, it flared up when Michael was under severe stress, which meant my late-night visitor was more rattled than he was letting on. "What kind of changes?" "Your living situation, for starters." He leaned forward, his voice taking on the practiced tone of someone delivering rehearsed lines. "This house is getting too big for you, and after yesterday at the party, several people mentioned they were concerned about your behavior." "What kind of behavior?" Memory lapses. "Confusion about where you were or who you were talking to. And Tommy said you seemed agitated, asking him to help you find something that wasn't lost." Michael's eyes never left my face as he delivered each lie. "I'm worried about you, Margaret." "We all are." The fabricated concerns were so detailed, so well constructed that I could see how easily they would convince medical professionals, social workers, anyone who didn't know the truth. This was how he'd destroyed his previous victims, not just with poison, but with systematic character assassination. "I feel perfectly fine, Michael." That's exactly what we'd expect you to say. People in early-stage cognitive decline rarely recognize their own symptoms. He pulled out a manila folder thick with official-looking documents. "I've taken the liberty of consulting with Dr. Martinez about your condition. He's very concerned." Dr. Martinez, the family physician who had overseen Robert's final weeks with such professional detachment, who had prescribed the medications that had accelerated my husband's decline, another piece of Michael's network. "I don't recall asking you to discuss my health with anyone." "You don't need to ask. I'm family." His smile carried an edge of steel. "I have a responsibility to ensure your safety, especially now that you're showing signs of the same decline that affected Robert." The comparison to Robert was deliberate, designed to terrify me. But instead of fear, I felt something else building inside me. A cold, focused anger that reminded me why Robert had chosen to fight instead of simply accepting his fate. Through the kitchen window, I saw Sarah's car pull into the driveway. She stepped out slowly, her movements careful and deliberate, like someone walking through a minefield. "Sarah's here," I said. Michael's head snapped around, and for just a moment, I saw something that might have been a panic flicker across his features before he controlled it. Good. She needs to be part of this conversation. Sarah entered through the front door, moving with the careful precision of someone who had learned not to make sudden movements or unexpected sounds. She had lost weight since David's death 3 years ago, and the stress of her marriage to Michael had carved new lines around her eyes. "Good morning, Margaret." "Michael." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Good morning, sweetheart. Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you. I'm trying to cut back on caffeine." Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, then stopped abruptly when she noticed Michael watching the gesture. "Sarah's been having some digestive issues," Michael explained smoothly. "Stress-related, the doctor thinks." "It's nothing serious," Sarah said quickly, but I caught the way she flinched when Michael reached for her hand. "Stress can be very dangerous if it's not properly managed," Michael said. his voice carrying a subtle warning that Sarah caught, but I was apparently supposed to miss, especially for someone who's been through as much trauma as Sarah has. The room is filled with the kind of tension that makes the air feel thick and hard to breathe. I could see Sarah's internal struggle, part of her wanting to speak, part of her terrified of the consequences. "Margaret," Michael said, turning his attention back to me, "we need to discuss your future care arrangements. Dr. Martinez has recommended a comprehensive evaluation at Sunset Manor, just for a few days to establish a baseline and ensure you're getting the right support." Sunset Manor, the private facility where wealthy families sent their inconvenient elderly relatives, where medical supervision was excellent and questions were rarely asked about rapid declines in patient health. "I'm not going anywhere." "I understand your reluctance. Change is always difficult, especially when cognitive function is compromised." Michael's tone was patient, understanding, and completely reasonable. "But this isn't really a choice anymore. The legal documents are already prepared." He pulled out papers bearing signatures I had never made, witnessed by people I had never met, power of attorney, healthcare directives, voluntary admission forms for psychiatric evaluation. I never signed these. "Memory issues can be very distressing," Michael said with practiced sympathy. "Dr. Martinez mentioned that you might not remember our previous conversations about these arrangements." Sarah's face had gone pale. "Michael, maybe we should..." "Should what, darling?" His voice carried just enough edge to make her stop mid-sentence. "Should I ignore the medical advice of a qualified physician? Should I pretend that Margaret isn't showing the same symptoms that Robert did before his decline accelerated?" The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah looked trapped between her desire to protect me and her fear of becoming Michael's next target. "Margaret, stop pretending. I know you found something at the anniversary party. I know Tommy helped you." The mask was slipping. "I don't know what you're talking about." The envelope. Robert's pathetic little insurance policy. His smile turned predatory. "Did you really think he was smarter than me? That his confused, dying brain could outwit someone who's been at this for years?" My mouth went dry. At this for years? Taking care of family problems, making difficult decisions that others are too sentimental to make. Michael stood and began pacing. Amazing how grateful people become when someone strongly steps in during their darkest moments. The room spun around me. He was talking about more than just Robert. "Tell Margaret about our conversation last night," Michael prompted, his hand moving to Sarah's shoulder in what looked like a supportive gesture but made her flinch. "About your concerns for her well-being." I think maybe you should see Dr. Martinez, just to be safe." Sarah's words came out in a rush, like she was reciting lines she'd been forced to memorize. "See? Even Sarah's concerned about your welfare." Michael's grip on Sarah's shoulder tightened enough to make her wince. "We all just want what's best for you. Just like I wanted what was best for everyone during difficult transitions." His eyes held a warning that made my blood chill. He wasn't confessing, he was threatening. Through the kitchen window, I noticed Tommy's bike leaning against the garage. He was supposed to be at school, but the bike suggested he was nearby, probably hiding, probably listening. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. "Yes, you are." Michael's voice dropped to a whisper that carried more menace than any shout. "Because if you don't, accidents tend to happen to people we care about." Tommy's bicycle ride to school takes him past some very busy intersections. Sarah's evening walks in the neighborhood can be dangerous after dark. Sometimes family members who don't cooperate find that their loved ones become vulnerable. Sarah's intake of breath was audible. "Michael, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Margaret needs to think very carefully about what's best for everyone in this family." His smile never wavered. "After all, accidents can happen to anyone, Even healthy young fathers who think they're being careful on apartment stairs. The threat was crystal clear, but vague enough to maintain plausible deniability. Sarah's eyes widened with dawning horror as the implication sank in, but she couldn't voice her suspicions without putting herself and Tommy in immediate danger. "Now, Margaret," Michael continued in his normal tone, as if the threats had never been spoken, "are you ready to be reasonable? Or do we need to make this more complicated than it has to be?" I looked at Sarah's frightened face, thought of Tommy hiding somewhere nearby, and realized I was out of immediate options. But Robert had taught me something important. Sometimes the only way to win a war is to let your enemy think they've won the battle. "I'll go with you to see Dr. Martinez," I said quietly. "I knew you'd see the reason." "You always were the practical one in this family." Michael's victory smile was blinding. "Dr. Martinez is expecting us in an hour." As I went upstairs to pack a small bag, I caught sight of Tommy's school photo on my dresser. His innocent smile, a reminder of what I was fighting for. Through my bedroom window, I could see our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, tending her garden, completely unaware that a serial killer was sitting in my kitchen making final arrangements for my death. But I wasn't the helpless victim Michael thought he was dealing with. Robert had left me tools, allies, and most importantly, the knowledge that my enemy's greatest weakness was his need to be acknowledged as superior. The trap was closing around me, but I was walking into it willingly, carrying recording devices and the determination to make Michael confess everything before he had the chance to kill again. The game was entering its final phase, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed I might actually win. Sunset Manor looked exactly like what it was, an expensive tomb disguised as a luxury retreat. Sterile corridors painted in calming pastels, windows that offered views of manicured gardens instead of the real world, and staff who spoke in hushed tones about resident comfort and behavioral management protocols. My new room was on the 3rd floor, strategically positioned between the nurses' station and the locked psychiatric wing. The door had a deadbolt that only opened from the outside. The windows were sealed shut and made of reinforced glass. The bathroom had no lock, no mirror, and nothing that could be used as a weapon against myself or others. "All for your protection and peace of mind," explained Nurse Patterson, a severe woman whose cold efficiency reminded me of someone processing livestock rather than caring for human beings. "We found that patients adjust more quickly when potentially dangerous objects are removed from their environment." Michael lingered after the admission paperwork was completed, his performance of concerned family devotion continuing even here among strangers who had no reason to question his motives. "I'll visit every day," he promised, squeezing my hand with what anyone watching would interpret as affection. But his grip was too tight, his thumb pressing against my pulse point like he was monitoring my vital signs. "Dr. Martinez says the evaluation process is very thorough, very comprehensive." The way he said comprehensive left no doubt about what he really meant. This wasn't a medical evaluation. This was the final stage of my execution, carefully planned and documented to look like natural causes. "How long am I expected to stay here?" "As long as it takes to understand what we're dealing with," he said, and something in his tone made it clear that "as long as it takes" meant until you're dead. These things can't be rushed. We want to make sure we get the treatment exactly right. After Michael left, I was alone with the soft hum of surveillance cameras and the distant sound of other residents shuffling through their medicated existences. But I wasn't as helpless as I appeared. The recording device Anderson had given me was sewn into the lining of my cardigan, so small it looked like a loose button, voice-activated, with enough memory to capture hours of conversation. All I had to do was survive long enough to gather the evidence that would destroy Michael forever. Dr. Martinez arrived that afternoon, his smile as artificial as his medical credentials would prove to be. He moved through my room with the confident efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "Margaret, how are you settling into your new environment? As well as can be expected, considering I was brought here against my will. I understand your frustration. Transitions are always difficult, especially when cognitive function is compromised." He consulted a chart that contained observations he couldn't possibly have made. "I'm going to adjust your medications to help with the anxiety and confusion your family has documented." He showed me a pill bottle containing blue capsules, the exact same ones I had found hidden in my medicine cabinet at home, the ones the pharmacy had no record of ever prescribing to me. What exactly are these medications supposed to treat? They're a mild sedative combined with a cognitive enhancer. They'll help you rest while also clearing some of the mental fog you've been experiencing. His fingers were already preparing an injection that would ensure I took them whether I wanted to or not. "Don't worry about the technical details. Everything will be much clearer very soon." As he approached with the syringe, I deliberately knocked over my water glass with a trembling hand, sending it crashing to the floor in a shower of glass and liquid. "Oh, I'm so clumsy. I'm terribly sorry." "Not a problem at all," he said, but I could see irritation flicker across his professionally composed features as he moved to summon maintenance for cleanup. "Doctor," I said slowly, using my age and apparent frailty to buy precious time, "these blue pills, they look exactly like the ones you prescribed for Robert in his final weeks." He paused, syringe still in hand, his eyes sharpening with interest. "That's quite a coincidence. Many medications have similar appearances." "Do they?" I picked up one of the scattered pills from the floor with deliberately trembling fingers, examining it with the careful attention of someone whose mind was supposedly slipping. Because I remember Robert saying these made him feel strange, confused, like his thoughts were moving through thick fog. Mr. Morrison was experiencing the natural progression of his illness. The medications were designed to provide comfort during a difficult transition. Is that what you call it? A transition? I met his eyes directly for the first time, because what I remember is my husband becoming increasingly disoriented, losing the ability to recognize faces, forgetting how to swallow properly. And it all started when he began taking these little blue pills. Dr. Martinez's professional mask began to slip. "Mrs. Morrison, you're clearly experiencing some distress." "I know what these pills do," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I know they killed my husband. The question is, are you going to kill me with them too, or are we going to be honest about what's really happening here?" The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Dr. Martinez looked at the door, calculating whether anyone might overhear our conversation. "You don't understand the situation you're in, Margaret. Your son-in-law has made it very clear what needs to happen here. My job is to ensure that it happens as peacefully and painlessly as possible. So, you're admitting it. You're admitting you murdered Robert. I helped a terminally ill man transition peacefully when his quality of life had deteriorated beyond acceptable levels. Just like I'm going to help you." He moved toward me with the syringe again, his pretense of medical concern completely abandoned. "The only choice you have is whether this happens easily or with unnecessary struggle." "And what about Michael? What does he get out of my death? Besides the considerable inheritance? The satisfaction of knowing his family's assets are being managed by someone with the intelligence and decisiveness to make difficult choices." Dr. Martinez's voice carried genuine admiration for his partner in murder. "Michael Stevens is a remarkable man. He sees problems that others ignore and finds elegant solutions that benefit everyone involved. The recording device captured every word, every clinical description of how they plan to murder me and make it look like natural causes. Just as they had done to Robert, just as they had done to David, just as they had undoubtedly done to others whose names I would never know." Will my family be visiting this evening? Oh, yes. Michael is very devoted. He'll be here with your daughter to say goodbye. Dr. Martinez's smile was coldly professional. We found that final conversations with loved ones help patients accept their circumstances more readily. That evening, Sarah arrived looking like she was walking to her own execution. Michael followed close behind, his hand on her shoulder in what looked like comfort, but functioned as control. Sarah returned with a small device hidden in her purse, a backup recording system Anderson had given her that afternoon. She looked terrified but determined. I called the school, she whispered to me when Michael stepped out to speak with Dr. Martinez. Tommy wasn't there. They said you picked him up for a family emergency. My blood ran cold. But I've been here all day. I know, which means Michael has him hidden somewhere. Sarah's voice shook, but her hands were steady as she adjusted the hidden recorder. He's using our son as leverage. When Michael returned, Sarah was sitting calmly beside my bed, but I could see the steel beneath her composure. How's our boy doing at school? She asked casually. Fine. Teacher says he's been quiet, but that's normal given the circumstances. Sarah nodded slowly. Which teacher? Mrs. Rodriguez or Mr. Kim? Mrs. Rodriguez, of course. Michael's smile never wavered. Interesting, Sarah said quietly, because Tommy's been in Mr. Kim's class all year. Mrs. Rodriguez teaches 4th grade. The silence stretched between them like a loaded gun. How are you feeling, Margaret? Sarah asked, her voice strained with guilt and terror. Tired, I admitted. It wasn't entirely a lie. Fighting for my life against professionals was exhausting. The medication takes time to reach therapeutic levels, Michael explained to his wife, though his eyes never left my face. Dr. Martinez says we should see significant improvement within the next few days. Less agitation, fewer paranoid thoughts about family members. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach again. Michael, are you absolutely certain about all this? She seems so present, so aware of what's happening. That's exactly how these conditions present in the early stages, darling. Periods of perfect clarity alternated with episodes of confusion and hostility. Michael's voice carried a warning that Sarah caught, but I was supposed to miss. Robert went through exactly the same progression. You know, I said carefully, I've been thinking a lot about David's accident. How devastating that must have been for both of you. Michael's smile sharpened, and I saw a flash of the predator beneath his carefully maintained mask. It was a very difficult time. But Sarah was fortunate to have people who cared about her welfare during such a vulnerable period. You were very helpful with all the arrangements from what I recall. The funeral, the insurance claims, helping Sarah adjust to single motherhood. It seemed like the right thing to do. David had been struggling with some personal issues, depression, financial stress. Sarah needed someone stable in her life. Pride crept into his voice, the unmistakable satisfaction of a predator recounting a successful hunt. I made sure she understood that she and Tommy would always be protected. Sarah was listening to this exchange with a growing alarm, pieces of a puzzle she'd never wanted to assemble finally clicking into place. You talk about David like you know him very well, she said slowly. We had several conversations before his death. He was going through a difficult period, questioning a lot of decisions, wondering if he was really the right father for Tommy. Michael's voice was gentle, understanding, completely fabricated. I tried to counsel him, to help him see that his family needed him to be strong. But sometimes people make choices that we can't prevent. But David wasn't depressed. He was getting better. He'd started therapy, joined a support group for new fathers. Had he? Michael's tone carried the gentle correction of someone speaking to a child who'd misunderstood something important. Or was that just what you wanted to believe? Sometimes the people we love hide their pain from us to avoid causing worry. I watched my daughter's face cycle through confusion, doubt, and dawning horror as she began to understand what Michael was really saying, but she couldn't voice her suspicions without putting herself and Tommy in immediate danger. "Sarah," I said quietly, "why don't you step outside for some air? You look pale." After she left, Michael's demeanor shifted completely. The caring husband mask fell away to reveal something calculating and cold. "You're being very cooperative tonight, Margaret. I have to say, I'm impressed. What choice do I have?" "Exactly. No choice at all, just like David discovered, just like Robert discovered." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that the surveillance cameras couldn't detect. "They both figured it out eventually, you know. David started asking questions about why his drinks tasted strange, why he was losing his balance so frequently. He actually accused me of poisoning him during our last conversation." "And what did you tell him?" "The truth. That he was right, but that no one would ever believe him because I'd spent months documenting his depression and erratic behavior." Michael's eyes glittered with the memory. The look on his face when he realized how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. It was almost worth the effort it took to set up his accident. "You pushed him down those stairs. I helped him understand that his family would be better off without him. David was weak, Margaret, too sentimental, too concerned with outdated concepts like honesty and fairness. Sarah needed someone stronger." He paused, savoring the memory like fine wine. "Robert was different. Smarter, more suspicious, but also more trusting of family. Or, so you made him trust you." "I made him grateful for my help during his illness." Amazing how quickly a dying man will hand over control of his affairs when someone offers to shoulder the administrative burden. Michael's laugh was soft and terrible. "I guided his investigation exactly where I wanted it to go, just enough truth to make him feel like he was fighting back, but never the real evidence that would have mattered." The confession was exactly what Anderson needed, detailed and incriminating. But Michael wasn't finished. "Tomorrow, Dr. Martinez will increase your dosage significantly. Within 48 hours, you'll stop recognizing faces. Within a week, you'll forget how to speak coherently. And within 2 weeks," he shrugged eloquently, "what about Tommy?" "What happens to my grandson when I'm gone?" "Tommy will adjust beautifully. Children are remarkably resilient when they're properly guided by strong parental figures. And with both his biological father and his grandmother gone, Sarah will need my support more than ever." Michael's smile was razor sharp with anticipated victory. "She'll be completely dependent on me emotionally and financially, just like I planned from the very beginning. You married her to get access to our family's assets. I married her because she represented the perfect combination of vulnerability, resources, and social connections. Young widow, substantial inheritance, extended family with significant wealth, and a trusting nature that made her easy to manipulate." Michael's voice carried genuine professional pride. "It was an almost perfect setup. Robert was the only variable I hadn't fully accounted for. And now? Now there are no more variables, no more obstacles, no more people who might ask inconvenient questions or harbor dangerous suspicions." He stood to leave, straightening his tie with casual precision. "Sleep well, Margaret. Tomorrow begins the final chapter of our family story." After he left, I lay in the narrow hospital bed staring at the ceiling and listening to the facility settle into its nighttime routine. The recording device had captured everything: Michael's detailed confession to murdering both David and Robert, his methods, his complete lack of remorse, his plans for my own death. But morning felt very far away, and the locked door reminded me that Michael's timeline might be even shorter than he had indicated. Through the small window, I could see his BMW in the parking lot, engine running. He was making phone calls, probably to Dr. Martinez, probably arranging for the medication adjustment that would begin my final descent into chemical-induced oblivion. But Robert had prepared for this exact moment. Anderson was waiting for my signal, and the evidence we needed was finally complete. Michael had revealed himself completely, his arrogance and pride overcoming the caution that had protected him for so long. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and justice, however delayed, was finally coming for the monster who had destroyed so many families while wearing the mask of care and devotion. I closed my eyes and waited for dawn, when the final phase of Robert's plan would begin. The knock came at 6:47 in the morning, precise and official. Through the small reinforced window in my door, I watched Detective Williams and 4 uniformed officers fill the corridor like an advancing army. Behind them, Anderson stood with a briefcase full of evidence and an expression of grim satisfaction. Michael arrived 15 minutes later, coffee in hand and that practiced smile of concerned devotion already in place. He was expecting to find a confused, heavily medicated woman who no longer remembered yesterday's conversation. Instead, he found me standing by the window, fully dressed and alert, holding the recording device in plain sight. "Good morning, Michael," I said calmly, turning to face him. "I've been waiting for you." Something in my tone made him pause in the doorway, his confidence wavering for the first time since I'd known him. "Margaret, you seem different this morning." "Do I?" I stepped closer, and for the first time in months, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "Maybe because I'm not the confused old woman you thought you were dealing with." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." I held up the recording device so he could see it clearly. "You understand perfectly. Just like you understood that Robert wasn't as helpless as you thought he was, and David wasn't as trusting as you hoped he'd be." Michael's eyes fixed on the device, his face going pale as the implications hit him. "What is that?" "Evidence. Hours of it. Including your confession last night about David and Robert and Dr. Martinez's admission about the medications he used to kill my husband." I smiled, and it felt like the first genuine expression of joy I'd worn in months. "Did you really think I was just going to sit here and let you murder me like some helpless victim?" The coffee cup slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor and sending hot liquid across the sterile tiles. But this time, it was Michael who was shaking. "You recorded our conversation," he whispered. "I recorded everything, every threat, every confession, every moment you thought you were safe because you'd convinced everyone I was losing my mind." I gestured toward the door where Detective Williams was now visible. "The only thing I don't understand is how you thought you could get away with serial murder indefinitely." "You set me up," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of admiration and rage. "I did exactly what you taught me to do, Michael. I planned ahead. I gathered evidence. I built an airtight case against a dangerous criminal." I paused, letting the reversal sink in. "The only difference is, my target actually was guilty of the crimes I accused him of." "Margaret Morrison," Detective Williams announced as she entered with the officers. "Please step away from the defendant." "Michael Stevens, you're under arrest for the murders of David Parker, Robert Morrison, and the attempted murder of Margaret Morrison, along with charges of elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, and falsification of medical records." The transformation in Michael's face was remarkable to witness. The concerned son-in-law, the devoted husband, the successful businessman. All of it stripped away in an instant to reveal the cold predator that had always lurked beneath. For just a moment, I saw him as David must have seen him in those final moments, as Robert had seen him during those last, lucid periods, empty of genuine human emotion, a perfect mimicry of humanity, wrapped around a core of absolute selfishness. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled as the officers moved to restrain him. "What you've cost this family. What you've destroyed with your paranoid delusions." "I've saved my family," I replied firmly, "from you. But the evidence." Michael's voice carried desperate confusion as the handcuffs clicked into place. Robert's investigation was compromised. I controlled everything he found, everything he thought he knew. Not everything. Anderson stepped forward, his usually stern expression softened by something that might have been vindication. "Robert suspected you were monitoring his investigation from the very beginning, so he built two separate cases. The fake one you saw and influenced, and the real one you never knew existed." Michael's face went ashen as the full scope of his miscalculation became clear. "That's impossible. I watched him constantly. Every phone call, every meeting. You watched what he wanted you to watch. The Christmas ornament wasn't just hiding evidence, Michael. It was hiding a complete surveillance system. For the past month, it recorded every conversation in that house, every confession, every threat, every moment you thought you were safe from observation. You're lying." Robert was dying, medicated, his mind was deteriorating. "We have Tommy's testimony," Anderson continued relentlessly. "Weeks of a child documenting his stepfather's crimes because his grandfather taught him how to be brave. We have Sarah's statement about the threats, the manipulation, the systematic psychological abuse she endured without fully understanding what was happening to her. Sarah would never testify against me. She's terrified of being alone. Sarah's been recording your conversations for the past month, ever since she found bruises on Tommy and realized what kind of man she'd actually married." Detective Williams held up another small device. "She's been working with us to gather evidence of your threats against both her and Mrs. Morrison." The lies were unraveling faster than Michael could process them. His face cycled through shock, rage, disbelief, and finally settled on the calculating assessment of a trapped predator looking for one final opportunity to strike. As the officers led Michael toward the exit, he suddenly broke free from their grip. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a scalpel from the medical cart that Dr. Martinez had left behind and lunged toward me with desperate fury. "If I can't have this family, no one can," he screamed. The blade flashed in the fluorescent light, but Sarah appeared from nowhere, throwing herself between us. Her small frame absorbed the impact as they crashed to the floor together, the scalpel spinning harmlessly across the tiles. "Sarah!" I cried out, but she was already pushing herself up, shaken but unharmed. "I'm okay," she gasped, her eyes fixed on Michael as Detective Williams and two officers wrestled him to the ground. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Michael's face contorted with absolute rage as the officers pinned him down. "You stupid girl! You have no idea what you've done. Without me, you're nothing. You'll always be nothing but a weak, pathetic widow." "No," Sarah said, standing slowly and helping me to my feet. "Without you, I'm finally free to remember who I was before you started destroying my life." Tommy suddenly appeared in the doorway. He had somehow escaped from his grandmother's house and followed the police sirens to find us. But instead of running to Sarah, he walked directly up to Michael, who was still pinned on the ground. "You're not my daddy," the 8-year-old said clearly, his voice carrying across the room with startling authority. "My real daddy loved me. He never hurt people or made them scared." Michael's eyes went wild when he saw Tommy. "You little brat! After everything I've done for this family—" "You didn't do anything for us," Tommy interrupted, his child's voice steady and clear. "You scared us. You made Mom cry all the time. You made Grandpa Robert sick." He pulled a small recorder from his pocket, the same one Robert had taught him to use. "And I recorded it all, just like Grandpa taught me." Detective Williams took the device with careful hands. "How long have you been recording, son?" "Since Grandpa got really sick and told me Daddy Michael was being mean to him. Grandpa said someday people would need to hear the truth." Tommy looked down at Michael one last time. "And the truth is, you're a really, really bad person. You can't protect him forever." Michael struggled against the handcuffs with desperate fury. "I have connections, people who owe me favors. This isn't over. The only place you're going," Detective Williams said, finally lifting Michael to his feet with the help of two officers, "is solitary confinement for the rest of your miserable life." As they led him away, Still screaming threats and promises of revenge, Tommy took Sarah's hand with the simple confidence of a child who knew his family was finally safe. "Are we going home now, Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, pulling him close while reaching for my hand. "We're all going home together." Dr. Martinez was arrested 20 minutes later, still in his lab coat and protesting his innocence, until Detective Williams played the recording of him describing the medication regimen that had killed Robert. His protestations died in his throat as his own voice filled the corridor, clinically explaining how certain drug combinations could accelerate cognitive decline while maintaining perfect plausible deniability. Nurse Patterson followed, along with 2 orderlies who had been accepting payments to ensure certain elderly patients received specialized care that hastened their deaths. The conspiracy was larger than even Robert had suspected, reaching into multiple facilities and involving dozens of vulnerable victims whose families had never questioned their loved ones' sudden declines. As we drove home together through streets that looked different in the morning, light brighter somehow, cleaner, as if a shadow had been lifted from the entire world, I felt the profound relief of someone who had stared death in the face and lived to tell about it. But more than relief, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Robert's plan had worked perfectly. Michael was in custody. The conspiracy was exposed, and our family was finally, truly safe. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of tragedy, and we were free. The trial began 6 months later on a crisp October morning that felt like the world taking a clean breath. Every day for 3 weeks, I sat in the front row of the courthouse gallery, watching justice unfold with methodical precision. The evidence was overwhelming. Robert's carefully documented investigation, combined with the recordings from the Christmas ornament, painted a picture of systematic predation that shocked even veteran prosecutors. Michael Stevens wasn't just a family killer. He was a serial predator who had targeted at least 8 vulnerable families over the past decade, always with the same patient methodology. On the final day of testimony, I asked to address the court directly. "Your Honor," I said, standing slowly but steadily, "I have something to say to the defendant." The judge nodded. "You may proceed, Mrs. Morrison." I walked to the witness stand carrying the original recording device that had captured Michael's confessions. The courtroom was completely silent as I faced the man who had murdered my husband and tried to murder me. "Michael," I said, looking directly at him, "you made one fundamental mistake throughout this entire ordeal. You thought because I was old, I was weak. Because I was grieving, I was helpless. Because I loved my family, I was naive." Michael's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, his lawyer's hand on his arm. "You spent months telling everyone I was confused, paranoid, losing my mind. You had doctors document my supposed decline, social workers question my competency, family members doubt my perceptions. But here's what you never understood." I held up the recording device. I wasn't losing my mind. I was gathering evidence. Every threat, every confession, every moment you thought you were safe. I was listening. I was recording. I was building the case that would destroy you. The courtroom remained absolutely still. "You killed my husband. You killed my daughter's first husband. You tried to kill me. But your biggest mistake was underestimating a woman who had 40 years of marriage to learn how to be patient, how to plan carefully, and how to protect the people she loves." I turned to the jury. This recording contains Michael Stevens confessing to multiple murders in his own words, not coerced, not manipulated, freely given, because he believed I was too old and too stupid to be a threat to his plans. The bailiff connected the device to the courtroom's sound system. Michael's voice filled the room, clear and damning. David started asking questions about why his drinks tasted strange. I helped him understand that his family would be better off without him. Robert was different, smarter, but also more trusting of family. When the recording finished, I looked at Michael one final time. "You were right about one thing," I said quietly. "This family will never be the same, but not because you destroyed us, because we survived you, and that made us stronger." Michael suddenly exploded from his chair, his composure finally cracking completely. "You manipulative old witch!" he screamed, his face red with rage. "You think you're so clever, but you have no idea what you've unleashed. I gave your family everything: protection, security, a future." "Mr. Stevens, sit down immediately," the judge ordered, his gavel coming down hard. "I saved Sarah from a pathetic drunk. I protected you from Robert's weakness and sentimentality. Michael was beyond control now, his true nature finally visible to everyone in the room. You should be grateful. David was worthless. Robert was a meddling fool. And you," he pointed at me with a shaking finger, "you should have died quietly like you were supposed to." Security officers moved to restrain him, but the psychological damage was complete. The jury had seen exactly who Michael Stevens really was beneath the mask of family devotion. As they struggled to control him, I remained standing calmly at the witness box. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the pill bottle Dr. Martinez had shown me at Sunset Manor, the blue capsules that had killed Robert. I had kept them as evidence, but now they served a different purpose. "Your Honor," I said, "I'd like to present one final piece of evidence." I held the bottle high so everyone in the courtroom could see it. "These are the pills that murdered my husband." Pills prescribed by a corrupt doctor, administered by a man who cared more about inheritance than human life. I opened the bottle and poured the pills onto the courtroom floor. They scattered across the marble like toxic confetti, and the sound echoed through the silent room. For months I was afraid of these, afraid of what they represented, afraid of the power they had to destroy everything I loved. I stepped forward and slowly and deliberately crushed them under my heel. But I'm not afraid anymore, and neither should anyone else who finds themselves targeted by predators like Michael Stevens. The symbolic act sent a clear message. The cycle of abuse, manipulation, and murder was ending here, crushed beneath the determination of a woman who refused to be a victim. Sarah testified with quiet strength about years of psychological manipulation she'd endured without fully understanding what was happening. She described the constant gaslighting, the subtle threats, the way Michael had used her grief over David's death to control her completely. "He made me doubt my own perceptions," she said from the witness stand. "Every time I questioned something that seemed wrong, he would convince me that I was the one who was confused, too emotional, unreliable." When the defense attorney tried to suggest that Sarah's testimony might be unreliable due to her emotional state, she turned to face Michael directly. "I know exactly what I heard. I know exactly what I saw. And I know exactly how you made me feel, like I was going crazy, when I was actually the only sane person in the room." Tommy's artwork was entered into evidence childish drawings that told the story of a stepfather's threats and a grandfather's mysterious accidents. The jury studied those pictures for a long time, several members visibly moved by the innocence that had been exposed to such calculated evil. When the verdict came back, unanimous guilty on all counts, Michael turned to look at me one last time. The charming son-in-law I had welcomed into our family was completely gone, replaced by something that regarded me with the cold hatred of a predator whose hunting days were finally over. "You destroyed our family," he said as the bailiffs moved to escort him away. "No," I replied, my voice carrying clearly across the silent courtroom. "You did that the moment you decided murder was an acceptable solution to your problems." The gavel came down with the finality of absolute justice. Michael Stevens was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for each murder, plus consecutive sentences for fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. He would die in prison, exactly as he deserved. A year after the trial ended, I was sitting in my garden with Tommy and Sarah's newborn daughter, Emma Rose, named for both my mother and Robert's mother. The roses Robert had planted were blooming magnificently, white and pink and yellow blossoms filling the air with the sweet promise of renewal. Sarah had legally changed her surname back to her maiden name and given it to both her children. She and Tommy had moved into the main house with me, creating an unconventional family bound together by shared survival and hard-won wisdom. The foundation established in Robert's name had helped over 100 families in its first year of operation. Each case was different, but the pattern was depressingly familiar. Trusted family members using love as a weapon, kindness as camouflage for cruelty, care as a cover for systematic destruction. Anderson had stepped down from his private practice to run the foundation full-time. Robert gave me a second chance to practice law the right way, he explained, to protect people instead of just shuffling papers and collecting fees. Grandma Margaret, Tommy said, looking up from where he was carefully watering the vegetable patch we had planted together, do you ever dream about Michael anymore? The question didn't surprise me. Tommy was growing older, learning to process trauma with the resilience that children possess when surrounded by genuine love and honest answers. Sometimes, I admitted, but they're just dreams now. They can't hurt us anymore. Do you think he's sorry for what he did? I looked at my grandson, taller now, his nightmares finally fading, his secret-keeping days over, and chose honesty over false comfort. No, sweetheart. I don't think he feels sorry for what he did. Some people are missing the part inside that helps them understand when they've hurt others. But that doesn't matter anymore, because he can't hurt anyone else ever again. But we're not missing that part, are we? No, we're not. And that's what makes us a real family. Sarah appeared from the house, baby Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. Motherhood had transformed her in ways that went beyond the physical. She carried herself with a confidence that Michael's psychological warfare had never quite been able to destroy completely. The insurance investigator called, she said, settling into the garden chair beside me. They've recovered everything Michael stole, plus punitive damages. The foundation will be fully funded for at least 25 years. Robert would be pleased. He always said money should serve love, not the other way around. On the second anniversary of Robert's death, we visited his grave together, carrying fresh flowers and the knowledge that his sacrifice had saved not just our family, but countless others. The headstone was simple granite, engraved with his name, dates, and a single line that had been my choice: beloved husband, father, and guardian of truth. Thank you, I whispered to the stone, my fingers tracing the familiar letters of his name, for never giving up, for believing I was strong enough to finish what you started, for protecting us even when you couldn't protect yourself. Tommy placed his small hand on the headstone, his gesture unconsciously mimicking mine. I remember the good things about Grandpa now, like how he taught me to tie my shoes and how he always smelled like coffee and newspapers. Those are the memories to keep, sweetheart. The love was real. Everything else was just evil wearing a familiar face. As we walked back to the car, Emma gurgling contentedly in her carrier and Tommy skipping ahead on the gravel path, I felt a profound sense of completion. Not the false peace of ignorance, but the hard-won serenity that comes from facing truth and emerging intact. Spring came early that year, and with it, Tommy's 10th birthday. We celebrated in the garden, surrounded by Robert's roses and the sound of Emma's delighted babbling as she discovered the magic of flower petals and butterfly wings. Make a wish, sweetheart, Sarah encouraged, as Tommy leaned over his birthday candles. I watched my grandson close his eyes tight, his face scrunched in concentration, and wondered what a child who had survived what he had survived would wish for. When he opened his eyes and blew out the candles in one powerful breath, I asked him what he had wished for. I can't tell you, or it won't come true, he said solemnly, but it's something good. Something for all of us. That evening, as I tucked him into bed, Tommy looked up at me with those wise eyes that had seen too much, but somehow retained their capacity for wonder. Grandma Margaret? Do you think love really is stronger than being mean? The question caught me off guard with its directness, its fundamental hopefulness despite everything he had witnessed. Yes, sweetheart, I absolutely do. It takes longer sometimes, and it's much harder work, but love is always stronger in the end. How do you know for sure? I thought of Robert's careful preparation for the moment when I would need to fight for our lives, of Anderson's quiet dedication to justice, of Sarah's growing strength as she learned to trust her own perceptions again, of Tommy's own courage in keeping dangerous secrets to protect the people he loved. Because we're here, I said simply, because we survived, because we're together and we're not afraid anymore. That's what love looks like when it fights back against evil. Tommy nodded solemnly, satisfied with this answer. I think Grandpa Robert knew that too. I think you're absolutely right. As I turned off his light and closed his door, I heard him whisper into the darkness. Good night, Grandpa Robert. We're all safe now. Outside, the spring evening was soft and warm, filled with the sound of crickets and the distant chiming of church bells. Somewhere in a maximum security prison, Michael was probably lying on a narrow cot, plotting appeals that would never succeed, nursing grievances that would never find resolution. But here, in the real world where love builds instead of destroys, where truth eventually surfaces no matter how deeply it's buried, and where justice, however delayed, eventually finds its way home, a small family has learned to trust again. The phoenix had not just risen from the ashes of tragedy, it had learned to soar. And in the morning, we would wake up free,